What's the link between financial literacy and violence? Or sex and medicine? From the intricacies of dating to the depths of yoga, these are the stories my guests and I exchange around a fire, real or virtual. We chat about love, sex, money, and power on our path to healing and becoming more holistically ourselves. Our main goal, though, to have fun and not take ourselves too seriously. Join us on this imperfect journey where every tangent is a fresh adventure in the learning. I am Mariam Mohammed, and welcome to The Great Tangent.
Just the acceptance of I have a high libido, and that's it. There's nothing wrong with that.
This episode is the first in a series I fondly call The Muslim Slut, where a guest and I deep dive into the lived experience of being Muslim women, reclaiming our sexuality and sensuality on our journey to heal and come back to ourselves. I live, create, and play as a migrant on indigenous land. Thank you to the First Nations of this land for your known and unknown service to the place I now call home. I'm sorry we still live in a colony. As my ancestors before me, I stand with you. Today's guest, Amna, is a Pakistani Muslim woman who chats to us about the intricacies of navigating sex and sensuality with culture, religion, and shame. And we talk a little bit about the juicy insights of unlearning a lot of that and how to navigate that with our children once we become parents. But Amna will do this a lot more justice. So let's dive right in. So Amna, first of all, I love your hair.
Thank you.
Fellow curly girl, wearing it proud and big. I love it.
Yeah, it took me quite a long time to accept my curls, but I'm finally there.
Yes, same. How old were you when you decided, okay, I'm going to accept my curls now?
Oh, it's only been a couple of years. After that, I've straightened the hell out of them.
Same. Until like 2016 or 17, I used to mostly straighten my hair.
Yeah,
and especially throughout my teenage years, I straightened it all the time.
So I was covering my head for quite a bit in my life, so people couldn't see my hair. But a lot of the time when I didn't, I would straighten my hair. Yeah. Living in Pakistan, people always commented about like, it's like a bush, it's a bomb blast, and those comments, it's just like, you never liked your hair. So I have come a long way to kind of be like, well, they're beautiful. I just need to understand them and speak to them.
Mariam used to say all the same stuff to me as well. आखिरी दफा कंघी कब की थी सर में तो अब मैं कहती हूँ मैंने तो कंघी ऑन ही नहीं करती.
Exactly. Abhi recently, a couple of months ago, I visited Pakistan, and this was the first time my family saw me managing my curls. And there was a lot of indirect comments. Oh, straight kara lo, change ho jayega. I'm like,
yeah, the obsession with the straight hair is part of the colonial hangover. कि जैसे गोरे लगने से गोरी चिट्टी हो कहीं बॉडी
सर पे ढेर
सारे हो और सीधे हो, like these are all just white women things, right? So ये obsession जो है is ridiculous. I did not realize until I moved to Australia. I was 19 years old when for the first time in my life I realized all women have hair on their bodies. No one ever told me. तो हमें इतना क्यों wax वगैरह करवाते हैं कितने बचपन से? Like I was like 12, 13 or something when people started shaming me for hair on my body. And then mommy was like, arm wax करा लो, ये करा लो. And I moved here and I saw all these गोरियां with all their arm hair. And I'm like, सबके हाथों पे बाल होते हैं तो मुझे क्यों?
I'm not the only one. I know.
I'm considering, should I get lasered around my legs? But then I'm not really sure because something I consider with this is कि future में if I have a daughter, then I want her to see me in my natural body and know what a natural woman looks like. I don't really want to have permanent modifications on my body because my future child will have a natural body And how can I tell them to love their natural body when I can't embody that myself? All right, Amna, tell me a little bit about you.
I am a Pakistani woman living in Australia. I am a very outgoing person. I have finally accepted Australia as my home and I'm enjoying living here.
Give me a little highlight reel, Amna, of what your journey as a Pakistani woman has been like, reclaiming your sensuality.
That journey has been very interesting because living in a country like Pakistan, you don't talk about sex a lot. You don't. It's it's a no-go. No. You never talk about it. There's no conversations around it. When I got engaged back in 2014, the person that I got engaged to was my childhood friend. And when we were talking, we started a bit of conversation around what is sex. There was so much shame around it that he even lied about that he didn't know about XYZ and stuff. And I was like, oh, you kidding me? And then later on, he admitted that he was like, I thought he would judge me. But I think I was lucky in the way that my communication with my partner has always been very open. And that also led me down the rabbit hole of exploring, okay, what does our religion say about it? Because all of my life I've heard is that agar main aapko kuch nahi karogi, shaitan puri raat pata nahi lanat bhejega or something along those lines.
Also, that's something you grew up hearing.
That is a very common statement that is I have heard. And when I looked up, I actually found an ebook which was on what Islam says about the sexual life and how it's supposed to be. And it was exactly the opposite. It talked about women's right. It talked about men's right. It talked about how it is so important for both of them to communicate, their psychological need, their physical need. And it was like, wow, there's nothing like that I heard growing up. So that was very interesting. And I think that kind of opened a lot for me as well.
Reading that ebook was the first time where the blinkers, is that what they're called? Blinkers? Little blinders. Yeah. Those little side blinders were taken off.
Yeah, the side blinders. I think I always questioned that statement. I was like, that can't be true. And there was another thing that every time if I did used to talk about something like that, the comment I would get was, oh, you're such a pervert. Like if I would talk about sex or anything like that, I would be called, oh, you're just pervert. You just want to talk about that. Even with my female friends, at least at that age, you couldn't talk to your male friends about it. It was a very far-fetched idea. But even with female friends, I think I was always kind of, oh, you're the pervert. You're always just like talking about something like that. So I always questioned it, but I think that ebook was a very good way to kind of, was like, yeah, we should be able to talk about it openly. We should be able to explore it. All the stories that you hear are very kind of superficial. You know, the TVs or drama, ki kamre mein gaye on the bed or, doing it on the first night, like stuff like that.
I was chatting about that with a friend recently. I was like, I don't really know anyone who actually looks forward to having sex for the first time on the night of their wedding. I mean, they're so tired. A wedding is hectic, especially if you're South Asian. You've probably had like 7 events leading up to your wedding night, and you have 1 million hairpins to take out of your hair and 10 kilos of clothes to take off. I doubt that makes for a very sensual environment to have sex with someone for the first time too, especially if it is the couple's first time having sex with each other. That is so much pressure. And on a wedding night too, damn.
In my case, we had our nikah, and then my husband, he had to come back to Australia while I was in Pakistan. So we didn't consummate our wedding until I came to Australia a year later. So after like a 32 hours flight, I still wasn't ready.
Oh yeah, fair enough.
And it wasn't even on our minds. Like, this is not what we want to do. Like, no.
What is your relationship to your sensuality as a woman now?
I think, first of all, just the acceptance of I have a high libido. Full stop. And that's it. And there's nothing wrong with that. And also being very open about the communication about sex with my partner in terms of what is good for us, not like what is good generally, but what is
Yeah.
good for what we both enjoy, how we want to do it, how we don't want to do it. And, like having
Yeah.
those conversations and even having the conversation around, well, we should tell people around us that these are the don'ts and these are the do's. Like, for example, that it's not going to happen in the first attempt either if you're having sex for the first time. There is that expectation on both female and male that, oh, it's like a failure if you don't.
Yeah.
It's not. It's a very natural process.
So now you're at a point where you feel comfortable enough and called to share that with other people to help them in their journey. That's a far way from being all hush hush about it and your
Oh,
partner being
absolutely.
like, what? No, I don't even know what sex is. How do you spell it? It's a long way. So what was in between?
I think a lot of it has to do with my own personal growth. Just knowing myself better, understanding myself better, a lot of my own education and my training. So I work in the mental health field. For that, I have to do my own training as well. I have to do my own inner work as well. So I think that also has played a huge part in knowing myself better. Where do I stand and working from there? I think that has really helped. And of course, being away from, like, when there's a geographical distance between those people around you who kind of always have that very judgmental voice, being in a country where it isn't that judgmental and people don't look at sex the way it's looked in Pakistan, I think that also played a huge role to be able to come stable or even be able to joke about it.
I love that interplay of inner work, personal growth, and sex. That's a common theme I've witnessed with myself and peers, other women that I speak to. They play a little dance with each other. One follows the other. The sexual exploration follows the personal growth. The personal growth follows the self-exploration.
Yes.
I love that interplay. So as you were on that journey, was there a moment where you learned something about yourself? Like, oh my God, I did not know this about Amna before.
I think it's just that part, that acceptance of naturally have a high libido, and that's it, full stop.
I love that reclamation of, yes, I am a sexual being and I have a sexual drive, and yes, that's all good. It doesn't make me anything other than just me.
And that is something growing up was always looked at, oh, women doesn't want sex. It's just a men's thing. I have also learned a lot about how important women's sexuality is for your general health, your mental health, and how much our religion talks about it. And then because I work with couples as well, so of course, that sex is a very common theme that comes in. I had to make sure I am comfortable talking about sex if I'm going to sit with a couple and talk about their sex life. I need to know where I stand with that. I need to be comfortable with my own discomfort or, work through it so I can sit with theirs.
What were some of the other things you grew up seeing and hearing about sexual women?
Bad women, slutty. Even when I'm saying these words, I feel bad, like you're a bad person in some ways, or bad character, should I say.
Another thing that just came to my mind, because I grew up in Pakistan as a Muslim woman as well, I was told if a woman is in touch with her sensuality and if she owns it very powerfully, too powerfully for the general society, then she is some kind of a sorcerer. She uses that sensuality to control men mostly, because that's a very heteronormative society. So all the role plays are all very men, women. And so it's all like, oh, that one, she's a whore, Ranbi, whatever they call her, and they'll be like, oh, she uses that power to control the men in her life.
And a woman didn't even have to be out there. She could just be loud, and that would be called, oh, she's asking for attention. Or she would dress in a way, and I'm not even going to say inappropriate, but just the way that she likes to would be called upon, that she's asking for attention.
And now, as an adult, when I look back at who the women were who were being called the sorceress or the slut, as an adult, I look back and I think, oh, bloody hell, I reckon they were probably really cool women. And there was a certain fear of a woman who owns her sensuality.
You know, even when you were saying that if a woman owns it too much, there is an intimidation for men there of some sort.
I find it hard in the context of growing up Muslim in Pakistan to separate the gender dynamics of it, because I feel like oppressing women's sensuality may be a patriarchal notion. However, the police was very often other women. It's been a journey of self-discovery for you, Amna. Tell me, did this journey of reclaiming yourself as a sexual woman heal parts of you?
Absolutely. Well, there's massive healing in that, because the shame was lifted out of it. I was able to be with myself with more compassion rather than questioning myself or questioning my needs.
You think about young you, that teenager who was told she's a pervert for wanting to talk about sex and being curious, that young Muslim brown girl who might listen to you now, what would you tell her?
I would tell her she is not a pervert and there's nothing wrong in being curious about stuff. There's nothing wrong in having interest about something like sex or your sexuality. It is completely normal, and to kind of put that shame away about sex or your own body or sexuality, thinking that it's bad in any way.
Oh, thanks, Amna. I feel like shame is another theme that comes up across the board, no matter who I'm speaking to about sex. The installing of shame in young people so that as they grow up, they keep associating shame with sex, even just with themselves. Even if they're not having sex with someone else, they find it shameful to explore themselves sexually and their own sexuality. And I feel like perhaps there needs to be a whole conversation around just the role shame plays in reclaiming our sexuality.
I think we use fear a lot to discipline, and we've been using that for a very long time now. We need to be very aware that whenever we try to discipline, if you're going to try to do it with fear, there's going to be shame and guilt underneath it. So it's very important not to have any shame around it, or even as simple as, naming the body parts rather than giving them baby names. Just saying, like, look, you have a penis and mom has a vagina. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a body part.
So what do you reckon, Amna, is the alternative to using fear?
We use fear because there is something within us that we are fearful, so that we project on others. It's very important to work with your own, that what am I fearful of, that I am projecting it on my child or on my cohort or my partner. I'll give you one example. I have a 3-year-old son, and I have recently toilet trained him. So he has never really seen his penis, right? Because it was in a nappy or ever touched it. So now he's only getting comfortable with the idea of like wearing an underpants and being able to touch it. And when he's trying to touch it or when he's trying to play with it, I get so triggered that as if he's doing something wrong. But that's my trigger. That's not his. My trigger is because that is something I have seen men doing growing up, and that made us really uncomfortable. Whereas a child doesn't know any of that. So I need to work on my trigger rather than telling him, oh, that is wrong, don't do it. I might still do that. Pardon me, I'm not perfect, but I am very mindful of that. I don't want to instill in him any shame around it, and educate him from that age that that is your body part. And let's not touch it, or you'll have to wash your hands, stuff like that, or it's not appropriate. So,
In
that's
every
where I'm coming
situation.
from.
Yeah, but it
Then
is
it's
okay to
like-
explore and play.
Then having those conversations with them, but we only be able to do it if we work on our own triggers, on our own fears.
Oh, wow. What an example, Amna. Thanks for sharing that. I love how we take this into parenthood. I don't have any children, but I can see that if I did have a son, I would also find that triggering. And even with a daughter, because when I was a little child and I was curious about my body, I was told it's shameful to explore it, to try to see what is down there, or try to discern why does that person look different to me, or all of those questions were shunned and shamed. So I can feel that if my child was curious about their body, about their vulva, about their penis, and they were exploring themselves, I can feel that it would be a trigger for me. But I've never really thought of that before, that in that moment, how do I then respond?
Yeah. So it's in that moment, you really have to work with yourself rather than with the child. Because a lot of the time we instantly go to fixing the child's behavior rather than working with your own self.
Oh, I love that. So how our own journey with sexual repression and then reclamation playing out in our relationship with our children. Wow, that's a whole other layer to this conversation. What do we take into parenthood?
And it is very important to be mindful of that, because we don't want to pass on to the next generation. Yes, it was passed on from the previous generation. Now that we have that awareness, we need to put a stop to it.
That was our guest, Amna. I am so grateful that she came on the show. I am left wanting to pull more threads from this conversation, especially around shame and how to break the cycle of not passing on our shame, our parents' shame, or even our collective shame to the next generation. But that is for another episode. This episode was produced by me, co-produced by Ayesha Moosani, and our guest was Amna. Hey folks, of all the things you could have chosen, thanks for giving me your attention today. If you enjoyed the conversation, share with a friend. See what comes up for them. Go on that tangent. Heal a little. This is Mariam Mohammed, and I'll see you next time.